Welcome to Get Wisdom Live with Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. What if God was also a co-host? What if the historically rare ability to question God directly and get profound answers back has been rediscovered? What would God say to today's sophisticated but deeply troubled world? Get Wisdom Live is here to share those answers with you. Here is Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. Welcome to another episode of Get Wisdom Live. I'm Brian Kelly, along with Carl Mollison, founder and director of the Get Wisdom Project. And this week, we're going to have Creator talk about wisdom and karma. Interesting combination, Carl.
Well, it's an important one, as it turns out, and something we don't really think much about because it isn't a central part of our education. And it wasn't so much in the religious realm either. It's mentioned under different wordings in the scriptures. Karma is an Eastern term, and basically it's referring to actually a law of the universe, the law of karma, which is also called the law of cause and effect. And the simple person in the street summation is what goes around comes around, meaning what you start rolling comes back around to you, and whether it's good or bad. So that's the backdrop.
We'll get right on to it. Carl, U.S. Creator, the questions for this show are derived from the life and work of the late hypnotist and prolific metaphysical author, Dick Sutphin. Sutphin's last book, published in 2019, 1 year before his death at age 83, was titled Wisdom Erases Karma. There's no doubt that if Sutphin were to sum up his storied life in just 3 words, they would be wisdom erases karma. These words were engraved on his tombstone, and the final sentence of his final book reads, "From my early days, I recognized that my life was about finding the wisdom to erase my karma." What is Creator's perspective on the phrase, wisdom erases karma?
All right. And this is what I channeled from Creator in answer to the question. We like this phrase because it is not only speaking truth, it is speaking truth about a fundamental principle that governs everything that happens. The universe was constructed to operate according to the law of karma, also known as the law of cause and effect, as well as all the other laws that bear on various levels of existence and forms of energy. The exchange between humans and one another, as well as everything they encounter in their environment, interacting with the world at all levels, is an energetic encounter and exchange inevitably. This is what is meant by the phrase of the human footprint, talking about the health of Gaia, with human inhabitants producing ever greater influence, some to the negative. All that you do as a human being transfers energy to those things around you, people and other beings included. When it is a positive influence, that will bring rewards. When it is a negative influence, that will take something away from you inevitably. Those exchanges are governed by the law of karma. So, understanding that you are in a vast sea of energy governed by very precise laws is being on the road to wisdom, because only with wisdom will deep understanding of cause and effect enable you to sort out your life and constrain your thoughts and actions accordingly to be in divine alignment. And that is the smoothest and quickest road to success, prosperity, inner peace, and overall balance in all things that will bring contentment and satisfaction with your achievements as life goes on. The accumulation of wisdom is hard won. You are not born with it. You are born with a lack of understanding and awareness that must be overcome by filling in the blanks. Given that karma is the ultimate ruling force governing everything that happens, at least as an influence, it behooves you to learn early and think about it often along the way in life, and take advantage of those principles to bring yourself into alignment with divine expectations. As we created the law of karma, it operates according to our expectations and desires for a universe of fairness and balance at all levels, where each is contributing something, even as it might take away. That is the essence of fairness, that your existence is shared with other beings of consciousness, not necessarily competing, but inevitably interacting. The wisdom to govern those interactions through your thoughts and actions wisely will rebalance wrongdoing, errors of judgment, and other negativity that has your name on it. That will keep you in balance and in a state of security from harm. There are many sources of difficulty you encounter as a physical being. The more you are in balance, the less vulnerable you become to the ups and downs of life, and the more effective you will be in rising above adversity to prevail and prosper. Healing anything that keeps you in the dark end of the ledger will make your life better and will help all those around you as you come back towards divine alignment once again and are doing more good than harm. If everyone hews to these ideas and principles, everything will get better and there will be no place for evil to reside. And that is an ultimate healing yet to be achieved.
So I'm thinking there's probably a pretty good reason we named this project the Get Wisdom Project, Carl.
Yeah, I think it was divinely inspired and it's very apt because it underlies everything. That's what the life journey is, I think, in a nutshell. It's a journey to wisdom,
Yes,
ideally.
right. And the idea that wisdom erases karma is interesting because I think, on the one hand, Sutphin's approach was like, self-actualization, allow negativity to flow through you, but don't judge it. Be calm in the midst of a storm, that kind of thing. And that's all powerful stuff and certainly will put you towards the path of divine alignment. But the lesson really is erasing karma can be done by asking for divine assistance to do so. I think that's part of the whole get wisdom thing, is to getting the wisdom to know that you need to ask to get the healing that really does erase karma.
Yes, this is considered a do it yourself world, but that's true only up to a point. That's because we're in this together. And we not only have the unity of the human family, we've got the divine,
Yeah.
who we are a part of and an extension of. So don't leave that out. That's the
Yeah.
bottom line. And
Exactly.
so we're going to talk about the ins and outs of karma, and it's very complicated and it's not so easy
No.
to achieve this simple idea.
No.
Erase your karma with wisdom.
Yeah, no, not at all. U.S. creator Sutphin's last wife before he died, Roberta Sutphin, is a gifted psychic medium. Like many gifted psychics, Roberta can communicate with her spirit guides readily. One day, Roberta was frustrated and asked her spirit guide, whose name is Lily, why she seems to get instant karma while some people they knew seem to face no consequences at all. Lily told her there is a group of people who do not abide by the law of karma as we know it. That there are two types of karma, those on the karmic wheel of love and those on the karmic wheel of fear. The laws are completely opposite. Every thought, intent, and desire for those on the karmic wheel of love comes from God and shine in the light. The opposite is true for the wheel of fear. People on the karmic wheel of fear are a collective mass that are earthbound and controlled by the kingdom of darkness. Can Creator tell us if this is true? Are there two types of karma?
All right. And these are Creator's words. This is a metaphorical description of the workings of energy and the law of karma. And as such, it is a simplification to describe the dilemma faced by those in your world having to reckon with difficulty of all kinds whenever negativity arises. And it very much seems that there are two camps, one promoting the positive and the other the negative. In actuality, karma is much more complicated than two opposites. There are many subtleties, many complicated interweavings, and mixed energies. And as such, karma can accommodate virtually everything that happens, as people are complex as well, with their thoughts and feelings and then actions that result, which might vary widely, even within a single day, where someone causes someone harm in the morning, but in the afternoon offers an act of loving kindness to help someone else. So they are not living on one wheel of karma and never interacting with the other, being an opposite, whether love or fear. In actuality, those states of mind and heart are highly variable. There are certainly people who live the majority of their time wanting goodness to prevail and harboring loving thoughts as a dominant characteristic, whereas some are evildoers and incapable of feeling much or any love when that is an extreme state of being. Karma recognizes everything quite precisely as an energy. And that is not simply a positive charge or a negative charge thought of simplistically in the proposed paradigm. Because karma is an aspect of consciousness and therefore is comprised of intelligence and information, its makeup can be quite complicated and mixed with respect to positive and negative components. So one can use a metaphor aptly to describe the dilemma of doing good versus evil, and that will nicely illustrate the dilemma that is underway all too often and on display in the workings of the world. But to gain a truer understanding of what is at stake and why, a deeper level of insight would be more helpful.
Yeah, I like the creator says a deeper level of insight would be more helpful because I think this is probably a highly simplistic explanation. But I've given it some thought on this and this idea of the wheel of karmic love, a wheel of karmic love, or the wheel of fear. Um, well, really, that's just a fancy way of saying that there's positive and negative karma, right? You know, and that if you do good deeds, you get good karma. If you do bad deeds, you get bad karma. And evil people are going to be doing lots of bad deeds, so essentially they're going to be getting lots of bad karma, right? So I suppose you can make that comparison.
Well, but again, we're thinking very much in physical, material uh, terms and considerations. You
Yeah,
can extend that metaphor. You could think of it as one wheel's turning this way, the other's that way. So if you're on the love wheel, you're going forwards. But if you step over onto the negative wheel of fear, you're going backwards.
right.
So you want to get somewhere. And so if you're always going back and forth, you might end up stuck in the same place, or you might actually lose ground too much on that reverse wheel. So these metaphors are useful. They have their utility,
But only up to a point.
only up to a point.
Yeah. U.S. creator Sutphin wrote more about Roberta's guide's response. People on the karmic wheel of fear are the psychopaths, sociopaths, and narcissists in your life. They are not individuals. Dick Sutphin asked, "What does that mean?" Roberta's guide Lily responded, "They don't reincarnate like we do. They don't go through the pre birth planning. You might think you are incarnating with the same dark soul, but they are not souls. The individual you think you are going around with will have the same energetic makeup, but they are not individuals and cannot reincarnate." What is Creator's perspective?
All right, this is what Creator tells us. This is a partial truth, but does not precisely define the state of being of individuals of a dark nature. This is mixing two realities. One being that soul based human beings who reincarnate may have a long history of serving the darkness and being predisposed by their prior karmic endeavors to once again follow a dark path and do so. Whereas others are more enlightened, in a higher vibrational state, and more inclined to seek opportunities to be generous and kind and contribute to the welfare of others as well as themselves. The other aspect not delineated here is that the true origin of evil and the darkness it represents are fallen angelic spirits who have lost their way and become parasites that influence people to the negative and can even be taken over and largely controlled by them to influence even their character and their entire lives and all they do and not do. So this guide was perceiving the level of negativity represented by the dark spirits, but not defining them by name, and simply looking at the level of the end product being people so corrupted as to be inhuman. But they are not devoid of souls, simply disconnected to a greater degree from their soul and its divine nature.
Okay, that last sentence really, I think, defines it. That they actually do have a soul, but because they're so corrupted, this guide didn't recognize them as human because they were literally inhuman due to their corruption, but not because they lacked a soul. So that really does clarify things. It also says something about guides, right? That guides may not necessarily be the ultimate go-to in terms of truth and wisdom.
Well, and one sees a lot of this in the spiritual lore, the information perceived by psychics and communicated to others, and the different schools of thoughts and the different perspectives of the many would-be leaders and gurus who help people or make their best efforts to do so, and have differing perspectives and different ways of describing it. And there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of ancient terminology, and it adds to the confusion, unfortunately. But the
Yeah,
principles themselves may be pretty straightforward. And that's why we're going to the ultimate source here, to help clarify things. So we're not stuck in one paradigm with its own descriptions and terminology, but it's limited and not the full truth.
yeah. But I do want to give credit where credit's due. The guide said that talked about a dark mass, and I have to assume that that dark mass is probably all the spirits stuck in limbo. You know, and it looks like they reincarnate that they're pulled out of that dark mass perhaps and reincarnated directly, but we know that's not true. That instead they're rescued at some point, and then from the light are reincarnated. So
Yeah, there's many things psychics tune into and then have to interpret, because seeing gives you a picture, but a picture's worth 1,000 words. And the key is which 1,000 words apply. What do you make of that? What is it really showing you? And how do you describe that or interpret it through language for someone's better understanding or your own? And that's where things can break down, because then it's up to that individual's knowledge base and past experience to make sense of it.
yeah,
And people are variable.
sure, absolutely. Well, since you mentioned 1,000 words, I'd like to mention that there's thousands of questions and answers in the Divine Wisdom database on getwisdom.com. Be sure to sign up for your participant membership so that you can see all the content that's at getwisdom.com. But the database is actually open to the public. No membership required. No login required. You can go there right now. Getwisdom.com/db for a shortcut. Take you right to the database, and you can start typing in searches and find over, I don't know, 6,000, approaching 7,000 maybe at some point, Carl.
Yes.
So get there today. Check out all the questions and answers that we've been doing with this project for the last 5+ years now, Carl. So there's a lot of wisdom there, and I invite people to go check it out at your convenience. Carl, you asked creator, Sutphin wrote yet more of Roberta's guide's response. Sutphin said, "We were both curious about how dark souls end up on Earth. Lily said the kingdom of darkness believes they control birth and death of the mass. We just got done implying that that mass might be a collection of souls in limbo. But that's not entirely true. There's a group called the Master Architects of Reincarnation. Think of these architects as air traffic controllers. Their work is vital. There's almost as many of them surrounding the Earth as there are humans. They only interact with spirits such as your guides and masters. They are in control of the Earth's balance and karma and help redirect predestined events." What is Creator's perspective on the Master Architects of Reincarnation?
All right. The creator tells us what was being perceived and described as these two differing bodies of oversight, the kingdom of darkness and the master architects of reincarnation, are simply other labels for the dark spirit meddler cohort, the source of all evil, and the angelic realm, who assist the divine and human beings at various levels of existence they go through during the reincarnation process. and then the return to the higher astral plane, ideally. Given that the latter does not always happen, if people are not in alignment and able to transition fully, they may become stuck in the lower astral realm and even join forces with the spirit meddlers as a spirit themselves that is highly disconnected from their divine origin and awareness. So there is an ongoing tug of war between these two spirit cohorts, one working for the darkness and the other working for the light. What is not appreciated in simply defining terms is that there are many factors and rules of engagement influencing to what extent the positive beings, the so called master architects of reincarnation, can step in to counter what the kingdom of darkness is doing and its minions. That is because of free will. And this is a companion to the law of karma because they are integrally related. In effect, wrongdoing creates a karmic penalty that will be revisited on the wrongdoer by the law of karma. But that is considered fair game because it is that individual's creation, and it is simply an ongoing energetic rebalancing for restoring a small part of the universe to set that right. Given that the law of karma has the assigned role for this, any other being, including positive angelic beings serving the divine, must tread lightly to not upset the workings of the universe as intended. So it is difficult for them to reign supreme and drive out darkness unilaterally. They can only intervene by invitation coming from the human side, so that anything they do will be a function of human free will. But they are a critical backstop and ultimate savior many times for a struggling humanity.
Well, it's helpful to have creator to be able to run this stuff by, Carl, because master architects of the universe, being the angels, it's two terms describing the same types of beings, and that creates confusion. And Lord knows the whole spiritual topic with all the different religions around the world is confusing enough. So it's nice to be able to have a go-to where we can kind of sort out these things and try to get a unified understanding of what's actually going on.
Well, and again, this really illustrates the dilemma of do-it-yourself spirituality. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. People do the best they can. But it's like the blind man and the elephant. Each one is examining something in particular and
Right.
then trying to make sense of it. And you may never get the big picture doing it that way. So we're trying to bring a unifying theme, a unifying overall vision of the actual architecture of things and the mechanistic elements bit by bit. So we're talking about some aspects today. And
Right.
there is a grand plan, and that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And we're also trying to give credit where credit's due. A lot of these principles have been approached by other people, including Dick Sutphin. He's come close on a lot of stuff we're discovering, but he's also missed a few things. And one of the things I've kind of realized in reading many of his books is that angels are not angelology, and angels is not really in there for the most part. And I don't know that he's ever commented succinctly on the whole topic. He doesn't dismiss the idea of angels, but he never really embraced it or went down that road too big way. So,
Yeah. Well, I like these observers and reporters as they are seeing reality. I find that useful. So it's not just you and me sitting here coming up with some sort of theoretical construct for which there's no other evidence than our word.
right.
All the world is seeing the consequences of these phenomena, but looking at it in different ways with differing levels of perspective. And so it's very useful. It's kind of like a blind clinical trial in a literal sense. The people don't see reality. They see a surface representation of something going on energetically.
Right. Yeah.
And then knowing what that is a higher order level of wisdom being applied.
Well, that's what we're chasing, Carl. U.S. creator Sutphin's last book, his memoir of 80 years, was in fact a summation of every important lesson that he learned in his highly adventurous and creative life. He helped millions of people and certainly earned more good karma than bad. That said, the one thing notably missing from his impressive collection of lessons learned was the concept of partnership with the divine and creator. There were hints here and there of prayer practice, but it appeared more hit and miss, and so certainly did not rise to any kind of prominence in his many decades as a noted spiritual teacher and role model. How could he and so many other advanced souls like him have not been able to embrace this most important insight?
All right, and Creator tells us Sutphin was not seeing the deeper connection because, like most people, the rules of engagement that keep the divine on the sidelines, waiting to be called on, did not seem a promising avenue of exploration. To be sure, the complexities of human behavior, emotion, and the workings of the mind are a plenty rich challenge for the creative thinker to tackle in trying to understand the human makeup and solve the many problems that arise that are complicated when people are out of alignment mentally, emotionally, or physically. So, unfortunately, spirituality was viewed more as a kind of positive ideal than a nuts and bolts reality that could be partnered with and exploited directly to make strides and add to knowledge. And as such, this was a missed opportunity of major proportions. But his work certainly pointed again and again to important fundamental truths, more about what was missing than what was possible. But that is where one needs to start because it better defines the nature of the problem. And eventually, any vacuum will get filled. The challenge is to fill it with the right things. And this you are doing with the present discussion.
I love the way that creator will step up and give credit where credit's due. Um, creator differs in that with different people. We've run quite a few people by creator, and I do sense there are times where creator will indicate, not directly, but very much indirectly, how much respect there is in terms of the accomplishments of that person, in terms of forging a divine partnership, leading the spiritual path, and really trying to live their life in a way that makes things better instead of just selfishly, accumulating their own rewards. And so I sense that creators kind of patting Sutphin on the back here in some ways.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I pat him on the back big time because what he did was tough.
Yeah,
Going against the grain, being entirely outside the mainstream for the most part, and being a pioneer. I mean, this is not an easy path. I think any human achievement that accomplishes something useful is remarkable, given that we're all in the dark here and we're confused and we feel alone. And the idea of God makes it seem remote. And we live with that kind of low expectation. And it hurts us, but we need somehow to break through. And so
yes,
that's
and
what we're attempting to say, wait a minute, you have more power than you think you do. And it
yeah,
actually is true. Humans have to initiate. It is up
that's
to
right.
us.
It is up to us, absolutely. U.S. creator Sutphin came up with 5 basic categories of karma. One, balancing karma, which is mechanical cause and effect, such as not being able to conceive a child because of child neglect in a past life. 2, physical karma, which is the misuse of a body in one life, so the appropriate affliction is created in a later life, such as being overweight because of starvation in a previous life. Number 3, false fear karma is from a traumatic past life incident that generates fear that is no longer valid in the current context of your current life. I think that's a pretty common one. Number 4, false guilt karma from taking on responsibility or blame for a past life incident for which you are truly blameless. And finally, 5, developed ability or awareness karma, such as musical talent. What is creator's perspective?
All right. And this is what Creator tells us. These are reasonable categories indeed to describe major forms of karmic reckoning and rebalancing, or rewarding a person for making prior contributions to personal growth or benefiting others in receiving some kind of improvement or furthering of their own desires in their current life. Courtesy of the law of karma, seeing an opportunity to return a prior investment through a love offering to a recipient in need. And that same energy comes back to the originator to help them become more successful in some way at a future time. In this way, the law of karma, through these examples and categorizations, clearly relates to all influences and eventualities, whether positive or negative, and some are multi component, even in their initiation. And this may well be true of the way it plays out. Many times, a reward leading to success brings new challenges and can complicate someone's life and create new problems, in fact. Many people of means find great difficulty because, in using the money they acquire, it creates problems for them they would not otherwise have. Liabilities, as well as missed opportunities and perceived failures by others, or they might lose their wealth through neglect or careless action and suffer greatly because now the contrast between their prior state of affluence and their impoverished condition might be quite unbearable. The point we are making is life is fluid, and while some people get in a rut and stay there, living lives of quiet desperation, perhaps, or a static sameness many would find boring, but others a safe haven because they are to some extent living in fear, all represent a state of energy and a projection into the future of a composite that describes them energetically and the way they are living and their influence on themselves, first and foremost, and then on others around them. People need to realize that they are as likely to injure or reward themselves as they do so to others. Acts of wrongdoing directed at the self are equally significant to the law of karma in assigning responsibility. In effect, a person who harms themselves is digging their own grave. The negative karma that ensues may keep them trapped in lifetime after lifetime of failure and suffering, all of which is self imposed by default because they have been feeding the beast with their chronic self abnegation, criticism, loathing, and rejection. It is like a cannibal living off their own flesh. That will never lead to growth and fulfillment, but only diminishment and an earlier demise. So, we would say that these are useful descriptions to illustrate the workings of karma, but do not take into account the many nuances in between states and complex interdependent karmic energies coming from all directions, because you are living in a vast array of karmic energies, both from your own creation and the many others you interact with, countless influencers in life after life after life, all of whom you become entangled with and inherit karmic consequences as a result. In any given moment, the karmic influences on you as you live your life may be enormous. It is when those energies align more closely with one another that a consequence will emerge. It might be a sudden accident or an illness. It could be a career disruption or failure, a marital dispute, or even an early death. It is a vast tapestry of interdependence because you are amidst a family of souls and interacting with other families representing other species of beings that are soul based but are in your environment, influencing you and everything around you. And all will be caught up in the karmic consequences.
Well, I think one of the really key insights here is where a creator says that you're essentially, digging your own grave with self abnegation, self criticism, self rejection. You know, now the interesting thing is that you're getting help with that though, because we have 90% of people have onboard spirit attachments. There's plenty of dark souls around. There's the interlopers. So they are encouraging you to engage in all this self-abnegation and criticism, but you're really harming yourself when you do so. You're getting help, which is going to fall back on them as well. But it's important for people to understand how damaging self-abnegation, criticism, loathing, and rejection really, really is, Carl.
Yes, and I want to comment as quickly as I can about the fact that if you think about all you're hearing, this is not something you can really do effectively on your own because you can't begin to know all the underpinnings, all of the lifetimes you've had that have accumulated negative karma, and all the origins.
Right.
And the way the divine fixes things like this is to go across timelines and do a karmic repair. And it might involve healing your perpetrators, healing your family members in other lives you've had, maybe the same ones in this life, maybe different people, but they left a mark on you in a karmic entanglement, and a soul collective of fellow travelers who we tend to go around with in life after life. You know, they're your friends, your colleagues at work, your mentors, teachers, friends, and people who maybe help you find a turning point. And so we use a soul matrix healing process through the divine realm to look at all of these influencers, and there are many, including cultural influencers as well, collective consciousness and cultural beliefs, ancestral beliefs, on and on. Everything in the Akashic records that is a repository of good things and bad things that are connected to you and have your name on it. So all of those get attention, and across timelines, the current life, prior lifetimes, future lifetimes, which loop back into the present. And each of those lifetimes has a future extension that gets set in motion. And that loops back and forth across time as well. So you're being bombarded continually by this sea of energy, and it's looking for you. And it's
Yeah.
got things to say and influences to exert on you through these natural laws. So
You know, I
go
was
ahead.
going to say, uh, people probably think that, well, isn't just enough that I forgive my perpetrators? Well, I don't know, Carl, because you're kind of corded to them, right? You have
Well,
energetic
and
connections with them.
yes, and that can be renewed even if you cut the cord. It can be reformed again through the right sort of interaction and mechanism that might well happen without your knowing it. So this is a simplistic notion, and it's a good starting point because forgiveness is really the essence of all healing. It's an aspect and it's an intention that gives wind behind it, but the details are where you run into trouble
You know, the
because
devil's in the details, as they always say.
there needs to be specificity.
Right.
And when you don't know the players, you don't know the times and places and events that happen. How can you fix them? You
Exactly.
can ask for a blanket forgiveness, but the divine realm doesn't do very well with blanket requests because we're not really doing our job at our end to
Right.
really empower them to do something in that level of thoroughness and detail. That's why we need get wisdom in these teachings, because this is a revolution underway to bring healing like never before to the planet.
Absolutely. Yep. Wisdom is the key, and that's what the episode is. Wisdom erases karma. Get wisdom. Our whole project. So it's a focal point for sure. And speaking of healing, of course, the Lightworker Healing Protocol. Carl talks about the soul matrix healing. Well, the way you get that invoked is by asking for it. And the way to ask for that is by learning and using the Lightworker Healing Protocol. You can download our ebook on the Lightworker Healing Protocol at getwisdom.com/LHP. That's getwisdom.com/LHP. And you can sign up to take the training for the Lightworker Healing Protocol. We have hours and hours and hours of instructive videos. We have a whole community of LHP practitioners that you can join once you become trained. It's really quite the little community there, Carl.
Yes, and we're doing wonderful things, and we get feedback about it. So this is exciting.
Absolutely. Carl, you asked creator. Sutphin wrote about hypnotizing a woman with fibromyalgia, which caused constant physical pain. He directed her back to the real cause of her pain hypnotically. She began to describe her hard life as a Christian nun. She resided in a tiny cell and suffered physically. She said, Christ suffered for us, so we must suffer for him as well. She said that under hypnosis. Furthermore, under hypnosis, she said, the physical pain began about the time I decided to devote my current hypnosis practice to Christ consciousness work. Sutphin explains, somehow her unconscious mind connected the past life suffering for Christ to a need to suffer doing similar work today. Sutphin directed her to release the pain, and she was fully recovered upon awakening. Uh, so it's interesting that, well, we'll just let creators wax on this. So can creator comment on this, Carl?
All right, and this is what Creator tells us. This is a good illustration of the possibility to obtain an instant healing from not just a recognition of the cause of suffering, being in the past, but a conscious acceptance and decision to change it in a positive direction, and applying that attention to the physical body in a way that allows the stored memory of prior trauma to release its poison. And because that poison that was being harbored gave rise to symptoms, the symptoms will recede as well. That is the essence of trauma resolution. We would say he was lucky in having a client who was poised to have a resolution take place. Because after all, her suffering was not because of grievous harm to others, but a simple misunderstanding of divine expectations for her. And in so wanting to walk a divine path, she wrapped herself in the mantle of suffering, but it was not truly hers to take on, and thus was easier to dispense with than if her fibromyalgia symptoms were arising from something much more egregious in severity. But nonetheless, this is an important illustration that a self healing can be managed with an outside prompting and facilitation of helping the person confront the dilemma and applying a way to resolve it that is acceptable to the person's own beliefs and makes the proper internal corrections to let the poison drain away.
You know, what's fascinating here is, creator doesn't use the word lucky very often. So, in that sense, I think creator's really saying by the word lucky that Sutphin was probably reading too much into this one case, that Sutphin wasn't grasping all the subtleties and influences and the fact that the suffering was really not a cause done by her harming others in the past that she still courted to, but was really just a subconscious reaction based on kind of a subconscious knee-jerk reaction, essentially just equating two things without any analytical thought, which of course happens because the subconscious is not an analytical being. So it's more of a reactive being and will make these kind of simple connections. So it's really, Sutphin was seeing all this, but probably didn't see the bigger picture, which creator is really giving us here.
Yeah, and I think this is, to put it in perspective, this was a lucky, in a sense, encounter where he had the right tool for this person to fix this problem because it was accessible and able to be fixed quickly. That's not always the case. It's not typical. It's the same with prayer. People get miracles from prayers on occasion, but much of the time, the prayer seems unanswered and life goes on with all the suffering continuing. It might be that it's taking a huge amount of time and the prayer hasn't worked yet. It might not work during the course of the life because time runs out. So this is why you need the highest level help you can.
Yes.
So we bring in creator to do this kind of work within a client's deep subconscious. That is a game changer. It still can take a long time, but you're not going to find a better healer than the Almighty.
Yes. And in this sense, Sutphin did not directly bring in creator. There wasn't really a direct partnership. It's probably an implicit one, essentially, but there wasn't a direct one that was invoked by request in this scenario. And yet, like you said, it was the right tool for this particular problem. So the word lucky is probably apropos. Carl, U.S. creator, a friend of mine in the 1980s told me she had learned that Sutphin, me, by the way, is Brian Kelly. So a friend of Brian, friend of me in the 1980s, told me that she learned that Sutphin was kidnapped by federal authorities and flown to an East Coast facility for interrogation. They asked him what he thought he was doing, and he said, teaching people how to think. They told him to stop if he knew it was good for him. We think for them, he was reputedly told. In his last book, Sutphin said only this: my heroes were all willing to speak out and act in response to what they believed. They have certainly influenced the way I communicate. They got me into trouble with the establishment on many occasions. Was he hinting about what my friend shared with me? What can Creator tell us?
All right, Creator said, this insight is spot on, that he was thinking about what had been done to him to attempt a silencing, and was making clear his determination to share his thoughts with the world, and citing others as heroes for doing so without divulging the whole story about his own situation and the risks for him. This treatment of him was accurately described and was arranged to happen by the interlopers, those truly running the world and using the governments and their agencies of law enforcement and military to enforce their will. When they want to punish someone or silence them, there are many ways to do so, including a targeted killing. They will often attempt an indirect warning because that is often effective to intimidate people to withdraw and stop making trouble for the established order. If they refuse to listen, they will be at risk of a more powerful sanction. This tells you something very important about the workings of the world, that unfortunately, corruption is rampant because true progress and breakthroughs to advance things are being suppressed through active interference. Those who are wanting to advance the frontiers will meet resistance of many kinds and may die in the attempt.
So I learned about this from a friend of mine that I met in the 1980s. And she had actually attended one of his seminars. That's how she had heard about this. She heard it from the horse's mouth. He shared that story in the seminar, and then she relayed it to me. Um, and it's interesting now that I think about it, that he did kind of, take a turn, I think, towards the later part of the 80s, kind of more away from metaphysical exploration and more into the kind of self-help, um, self-actualization, positive thinking schools. And so he might have caved a little bit to that threat in order to keep going and make
Well,
make some subtle changes.
he might have been heavily subjugated with mind control manipulation, or the attempt made, and it might
Yes,
have had some effects.
might have had. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
because it you don't really know where your ideas are coming from all the time because
right.
there's so much subliminal programming, and it's bound to rub off to some extent because it's very clever.
Yes,
It tells you something you want to hear. You want to help, you want to deal with a certain kind of problem. They'll send you programming and offer you a solution, and then a light bulb goes on in your mind. You think, "Oh, gee, I'm going to go with this. This sounds great," and
yeah,
then you do, and before you know it, you're a new ager, or you're
yeah,
you're
and he
doing some kind of
yeah,
sugarcoating and not getting deep
right.
progress.
Yes, and he was making deep progress from the late 70s to the early 80s, and then kind of lost the mojo, I would say. And like you said, is probably the result of compounded programming as well as the direct threats that he received. I'm certainly saying that they probably had some effect on him. So
Yeah,
I don't.
well, you're going to ask about some deeper, darker consequences he suffered.
Yes,
So
exactly.
they weren't done with him.
No, they weren't, unfortunately.
Just a kidnapping and a threat.
U.S. creator. Both Sutphin and his good friend Richard Bach, author of the 1970s surprise bestseller Jonathan Livingston Seagull, had their life savings and even copyrights on all their intellectual property stolen from them. The two thefts were not otherwise related. Both were left absolutely destitute. Bach's manager stole his, and in 2011, some hacker drained Sutphin's bank accounts, transferred his copyrights, and wiped out all the master copies of his life's work. It took 3 years of lawsuits for Sutphin just to get his copyrights back, but everything else, the money and all the master copies, were gone. Can Creator share if empowered prayer and/or the Lightworker healing protocol could have prevented these evil attacks and tragedy that neither man fully recovered from?
All right. And this is what Creator tells us. Here you are coming to the point of this discussion because studying problems and suffering that ensues becomes pointless without an understanding of ways to resolve the dilemma. What is truly needed in your world is solutions for suffering at all levels. The suffering of these two achievers was indeed a deliberate orchestration. They were not related as to the immediate culprits, but both were arranged through the machinations of the extraterrestrial alliance to punish them for being humanitarians. This is routine in your world and is the reason many, many people who rise to prominence have an untimely setback, whether financial, personal difficulty, illness, substance abuse, and addiction, or accidental death. These individuals were lucky that their punishment was indirect, being only the theft of their intellectual property. The answer for all such wrongdoing and the many acts of negativity arising spontaneously, at least seemingly, from ordinary people is for there to be a healing for all of their negative karmic obligations, keeping them from divine alignment. That is why you are working to bring forward the use of empowered prayer and the Lightworker Healing Protocol as an ultimate healing solution, capable of even working on the perpetrators themselves of the ultimate origins for evil to be abroad in the land, and the most serious of headwinds for human progress and a threat to your survival as a species. The extraterrestrials controlling your world desire to eliminate you altogether and have planned an annihilation in the next few years. They were corrupted by the dark spirit meddlers long, long before human existed and are now psychopaths with no ability to experience love or compassion. That is why the darkness that has encroached to darken your world is such a force to reckon with, being so ruthless and extreme in its depravity. You must have divine help to have any chance of surviving their evil plans. But the divine cannot act without your invitation and instructions. Here we come back again to the dilemma. Where is God? And why are there so few believers if God is real? That is a consequence of your having the authority, so that the divine cannot intrude without an invitation and actual instructions for what needs to be done, and even how to go about it, ideally. If you are to be in the driver's seat in the partnership, that means you must know how to apply the gas, work the brakes, steer the wheel, and make many decisions about dealing with other variables, such as severe weather when you might need windshield wipers and so on. In other words, you need to take charge of the situation and face your dilemma, but with a deeper understanding the problem exists, as we have described it. And if you learn how to request healing and divine intervention through prayers that work and through following a healing protocol designed for this very purpose to address every form of negativity that will worsen things for beings individually and collectively, you will have the ability to not only heal humanity, but heal your perpetrators. The most important thing we can tell you is the quickest way to achieve safety and long term success is to heal the evildoers. That will stop the ongoing warfare aligned against you and will let you flourish like never before without the strong headwinds the darkness has brought to your world. You must learn your way forward and earn the good karma needed to neutralize all that has gone wrong that you have been a part of, wittingly or unwittingly, through the ages. Only the divine can effect a karmic repair that vast and profound in its intensity. It is time to grow up. You have a chance to solve the problem of evil for all time and be a leader in the vanguard of ensuring the universe lives through love and not its absence, leading to power and corruption. You can do this safely and through your own thoughts in following the guidance of these teachings to do the healing needed. If you turn the power of your heart and the ability to love to bring goodness to those most in need, the evil ones, this will give you time to heal all of humanity and beyond to the many worlds being subjugated throughout your galaxy by the extraterrestrial predators who menace it. This is doable. We would not tell you if this were not so. But without your actions, your situation is truly dire and a hopeless one.
So, I have to say that as far as a DIY, do it yourself approach of spirituality, Sutphin was one of the best instructors out there, but he's also an object lesson. And the object lesson is that this champion of DIY spirituality, suffered and didn't hold up all that well in comparison to the threat leveled against him. The get wisdom is not only about fixing yourself, but literally reaching out and helping to fix the world outside. It's solving the problem of evil. Sutphin never really, focused in on the problem of evil per se. It was the evil was something you needed to scrub out of yourself, but that's kind of where it stopped. And we're recognizing in this project, Carl, that not only do we have to scrub it out of ourselves, but we're responsible for scrubbing it everywhere.
Yes, we're being maligned and manipulated to do evil things, think evil thoughts, be selfish, be destructive, and even self destructive. And that's why the world is at war with itself. There's warring factions everywhere you look. And people are cutthroat about it these days. It's really ugly, but it's also holding us down and holding us back. And we need a deeper healing for the cause of this. It's being done to us to make us this way, to turn
Yes.
us to the darkness.
Right. And, working on yourself is fantastic, but that's not going to solve the problem of evil, because we have to not only fix ourselves, we have to fix others. And the only way you can do that effectively, realistically, ethically, morally, is with divine partnership and tools like the Lightworker Healing Protocol and empowered prayer, Carl.
Well, we're up against a strong negative force here. And you can use any analogy you like. It's like a mass school shooter. You can go in and patch up the kids, drag them to safety, give them a transfusion if they're still breathing, and so on. You can do that all day long. But until you take out the shooter, guess what? Your kids are going to be in danger, and you too. So that's what we're saying here. Your house is on fire. You need to call the fire department.
Yes. Yes. And that's the spirituality and the wisdom that the Get Wisdom Project is bringing to the world, is that we have tools with divine partnership. We can ask Creator, ask the angelic realm, ask the divine realm to intercede on our behalf. We have that charter, Carl. We have that mandate. We have that privilege.
We were created to solve the problem of evil. So this tells you how far we've drifted away from that imperative, because we're not even thinking about it. The secular movement has destroyed the idea of God for many.
Yes.
And they're not talking about evil much other than their enemies. They assign all the evil to. And that is just a game that's being played by the darkness to pit us against each other, divide and conquer. You see it all day long, everywhere you look. That's the game.
Now there's tools to actually do something about it. You don't have to sit back and say, well, there's nothing we can do, right? That's what everybody's doing, right? Everybody's sitting on the sidelines, throwing their hands in the air and saying, well, as long, the important thing is I live a good life, that I'm not part of the problem. But that's great. We don't want you to be part of the problem, but you need to be part of the solution. And the Lightworker Healing Protocol, learning that, embracing it, invoking it is the way to do that. GetWisdom.com/LHP, GetWisdom.com/LHP. That's all we got for this week's episode of Get Wisdom Live, Carl. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Be well.